We're sitting down today with Andy Hoffman of Crypto Gold Central. Andy's been writing about alternative investment assets such as gold and Bitcoin and silver for must be over a decade now, Andy. How long have you been writing about gold?
17 years, actually.
So 17 years, that's since 2002 approximately, when gold was $250 an ounce.
I think it was more like 400 something back then, and silver might have been $3 or $4.
And so it's interesting. I think you've got a unique perspective because you had nearly, a decade of experience writing about gold and silver before Bitcoin came onto the scene. And you also took, unlike a lot of gold bugs, to Bitcoin. And so you've since that point been writing about gold and Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I started talking about precious metals in 2002 when I was still working on Wall Street as an oil field analyst at Solomon. And then when I left in 2005, I just went all into the precious metal sector. Both, I was already in it personally, but professionally also. And I spent many years marketing mining companies, and then, of course, working 6 years as the marketing director of a major bullion dealer. But I got into Bitcoin. Actually, I had a little Bitcoin at Mt. Gox, but I didn't really get into it until early 2016. And by the time it was mid 2017, I was selling my precious metals, leaving the bullion industry and going all into Bitcoin. And here we are over 2 years later. Actually, I started Crypto Gold Central when I left the bullion industry in the summer of 2017. And I'm at the point where I now believe the future is Bitcoin. I'm 100% invested in crypto. And I think that the past is fiat currency, of course, and precious metals.
That's interesting. So is the gold market dead, in your opinion?
I believe so. I think that there's a lot of, it still gets a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of press. It's still considered by the old world as kind of this, inflation, put it this way, the thing you would invest in if you were worried about inflation. The fact is, though, that no one actually does it. You could see the mint numbers are down significantly. Obviously, retail demand is down because no one even talks about it anymore. I mean, I remember at Miles Franklin that our average client was in their 60s, and that number's only going up. I just think it's become an archaic investment. And while there's talk maybe about central banks, they say, well, Russia and China, they're investing in it. There's no proof. There's no more proof that Russia and China are buying gold than there is that the U.S. Mint, the Fort Knox, actually has what they say. It's just talk. I think the future, I think right now, frankly, the central banks are all in supporting their fiat Ponzi. And I think that the future is going to be crypto. It's just started. And it still has a lot of pushback because it's so novel and people are scared of it. But I believe that that's going to be the future of store value, and I think it's going to be also the future of finance is going to be in crypto. It's just starting out, though.
Of course, there's been lately a lot of talks about things like stable coins, and a lot of analysts in the blockchain space see stable coins as somewhat of a launching pad for what they're terming decentralized finance, which is essentially all of the world's finances reimagined in a decentralized blockchain setting. I got into the gold industry around 2008 or 9. I graduated college in 2009, and it was right after we were hearing about trillion-dollar bailouts. It was the beginning of the Great Recession. And I went into the precious metals market and worked in it from 2009 till about 2012 when I got into Bitcoin. And in 2012 or 2011, I remember a lot of people coming in after having bought $49 silver with all of their savings, and they were crushed. And I was like a 23-year-old kid at that point. In 2012, I went all in on Bitcoin. And at this point, I've kind of taken a step back, and I wonder if gold might not be a option for a savings account still. But you're saying that you think that demand's going to decrease over time. And then, kind of more pointed, I'm really curious. What I noticed back then was gold was kind of a mystery market. You couldn't really like know exactly what was going on. The information seemed to me to be controlled by just a few organizations, and there were always reports in the media, which I think we all are aware that. I mean, at least personally, I don't read something in even Russia Today or a mainstream publication like New York Times and assume that it's 100% true. So I'm curious to kind of hear a little bit more about that. We can't know for sure that central banks are buying gold.
Right. Well, you actually, I wrote it down in the notes because you just mentioned several topics. One, you're talking about stable coins and decentralized finance. I mean, when I think of stable coins, it's really just fiat currency. They're just, exchanges are just holding that, in a form that can be used to just hold, currency until you go from one coin to the next. So I don't really view that as a decentralized finance platform. I just do think over time, right now it's very nascent. The ICOs and IEOs, a lot of them are scams. A lot of them, have regulatory issues that they have to get through because they still have fiat on ramps. In time, I think that we'll see a lot more decentralized finance. But right now, we're not at that point yet. That's going to be once Bitcoin is a really, really big part of society, and that could take a few years. And back to precious metals. The thing is that Bitcoin is so transparent. You could see on the blockchain, where the Bitcoin is. Precious metals are the most opaque market in the world, and all the paper that has been created. I mean, hundreds of times more paper products than there are actual physical metals. And frankly, that's where all the trading is. So when people say the price of gold or silver is going up or down, it's not. It's futures, because there's no real retail buying anymore. It's all a matter of trading futures. So there is no real market. And like you mentioned and I said before, no one has any idea how much actual physical gold or silver is out there because it's never audited. And it's like if the Russians or the Chinese, who are famous for being liars, are their governments are, you're going to trust that they say that they're buying. I mean, I would trust them less than I would trust the Federal Reserve, what they say that they're buying. So there's absolutely no proof of what anyone is doing. And if they were buying so much, you would think the price would go up, which it hasn't. In real terms, the price of precious metals are probably at or close to an all-time low. And you talk about 2011. I remember well when the prices of gold and silver went up. But in hindsight, when I look back at what actually happened, it didn't go up because people were fearing that the U.S. government was going to get downgraded from AAA. What happened was the Sprott Physical Gold and Silver Trust, what were they? I can't remember what their names are anymore. PSLV and PG, whatever it was called. They started in late 2010. And I think what happened was when they started, they got all this early investment and used it to go buy up all the gold and silver to put in their trust. And I think that's what caused the big silver surge in early 2011, which the U.S. government quickly quashed, starting with the Bin Laden's killed raid in April of 2011, and we never saw those numbers ever again. I think just generally speaking, that demand for physical gold and silver is as low as it's ever been, and I expect that as the older generations pass their precious metals on to their heirs are going to sell it. So I think there's going to be a permanent supply increase that comes onto the market for years. Because when it comes down to it, it's laughable when you think about all the things that for years I and precious metal bulls would say this is why it's better than fiat currency. It's fungible, it's divisible, it's portable, it's et cetera. And then when you look at that compared to Bitcoin, you go, actually, precious metals has none of those things. I mean, it's nice to think that they were an alternative to fiat currency being destroyed by inflation, but the fact is that they are laughable substitutes, especially with all the paper derivatives that have diluted them for fiat currency. So I just don't see a future for precious metals at all. And I was the biggest bull of all.
What will the death knell of gold look like? How will this play out, in your opinion?
Well, I think we've already seen the death knell of silver. I mean, silver is such a vastly inferior product to gold. There's more of it out there, and from a store value standpoint, because it costs so little. You have to store so much of it. I mean, I remember there was a time where I had 7 or 8 safes worth of silver, and this, you couldn't move it around. And I remember selling it was an actually horrifying experience that took a very long time to do. At least gold still has a value high enough because basically because it trades at the mining cost, and the mining cost of gold is higher than silver because there's less of it out there, that you can store a reasonable amount of it without putting it in, filling up safes with it. So, and it has a legacy value. And yes, there are central banks that still hold it. So I think gold will hold its cachet a little longer. But as you could see by the price, even with all this explosion of money printing, it hasn't gone anywhere for forever, basically. I think silver is long dead as a monetary metal, and it's just a waste of time. Yes, it has some kind of positive correlation price-wise to gold, but it doesn't go anywhere. And the gold-silver ratio has gone up, even as gold has, people get excited. Gold went to 1470, this tiny increase. And even with that, the gold-silver ratio has gone up. I think gold will be around forever, and but it will never be an exciting thing. It will never be this major inflation hedge. I suppose if we had the worst case scenario of a complete fiat collapse, yes, it would go up a lot in value. I think Bitcoin would go up a lot more. And I really don't expect that anymore. I think there's going to be a transition over time from fiat currency to a crypto world. So I'm not as pessimistic as I used to be about this all-out crash. Obviously, we do have this huge debt problem, which is only getting worse and worse and worse, and it will resolve in lower fiat currency values. But because of Bitcoin, I have a more optimistic view of the future than I ever had before.
Yeah, I was doing some research last night in about Bitcoin, and I saw a tweet by an NFL football player, something like
yes, the guy Russell Okung, that was amazing.
Yeah, I'm all in on the revolution, long Bitcoin, short the bankers. I've never seen gold penetrate the popular culture like Bitcoin has.
Yeah, he was on the Broncos a few years ago, and it didn't work out too well. But he's like a Pro Bowl player. But I couldn't believe when I was reading it that this was actually a football player. I mean, he was writing as eloquently as some of the top economists, and of course, he's got it right compared to them. He's just talking about all the things that I've been talking about for years, and he did it in such a beautiful way in one article. And yes, I mean, again, he's symbolic. He's one of these people who has money. And what happens when a lot of people who have money start to think this way? A little bit here, a little bit there, and the next thing you know, the price of Bitcoin and some quality cryptos, Bitcoin's not the only crypto out there, are going to be worth vastly more than they are today.
So back to the death knell of silver. Right now, the gold-silver ratio is at 86.5 to 1. Where does that stand historically, and what should people take from that?
Right. I mean, historically, it doesn't even matter what people say in the gold community. Say, well, it was 15 to 1 for many years. Yeah, it was. The price was set at 15 to 1 by governments, hundreds of years ago, because that was the ratio that it came out of the earth. And probably that ratio is even more favorable for silver now. It's probably more like 9 to 1. But the fact is, it's not monetary anymore. Gold is barely monetary, and silver is just not, because it's such big and heavy. And in the modern world of fiat and digital and now crypto, there's just no use for it. So, I mean, we've seen the death knell of silver. It's still $17, and the gold-silver ratio is rising. And I just think it's a giant waste of money from an investment standpoint. Even gold, I have no interest in, but I think that the gold-silver ratio probably will continue to go up.
Let's say Bitcoin was never invented. Would gold and silver, or rather, let me phrase this differently. Has cryptocurrency and Bitcoin sapped demand, especially millennial demand from gold and silver?
Yes. Well, I mean, there really never was millennial demand for gold and silver. And all the time I was there, like I said, our average client was in the 60s. And I believe that number is going to rise to the 70s soon enough. It's not like we had, you get a handful of people who are younger who have this sound money background, in their studies. But we had essentially no millennials or even, Gen X's that were buying gold back then, and we certainly aren't going to now. And you say, well, if Bitcoin weren't invented, what would happen? Well, it's a good question, but the fact is that as time passes on, it's a more technological world. You just realize that the reasons that made gold and silver valuable as money in the past are further and further in the past. I suppose they would probably have certainly more interest than now if there was no Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is just, it's a natural evolution of money. It came along, as you said, 2008-9. I don't think it's a coincidence that that's when it was invented, even though who knows when such complex technologies will come around, but it did. So there's no looking back.
What do you make of the last year in gold prices? It's, I think, the best year gold's had in about 9 years. A lot of people are pointing towards 2020 as a continuation of the bull market. A lot of the big banks are predicting like a $1,600 gold, which is up about $100 or $130
Okay. I mean,
now.
think about the numbers you're talking about. $100. I mean, the price of gold was 1,900 in 2011. And inflation adjusted terms, it's at an all-time low now. It's funny because you get a guy like Peter Schiff who's, he's just trying to sell his business, saying how great gold is doing. I'm like, gold's up 10% this year, 10% for all the hype about how great it is. It's up 10% this year. And like you said, it's not only one of the best years it's had, it's probably one of the only years I can even remember where the price was up. I think you had a couple of years it was up a couple of percent. You have to go back to, to 2010 or 11, the last time the price of gold was even up in a year. So I hardly think going up 10%. And think about all what's going on in the monetary world with this explosion of debt and negative interest rates and QE going on. And we're talking about gold went up 100 and big banks think it may go up another $100. I mean, this is nothing. Bitcoin since 2011 was what, $5, and now it's $7,000. I mean, it's not really apples to apples because it was just invented, and market cap wise, it's still tiny. But to say that, when even people in the precious metal community can't actually come out and talk about how great gold is doing. Even look at silver is not even $17. When we had the Brexit crisis in 2016. I remember silver went to about $21, and gold probably got to no more than the 14. So at the same gold price, silver was much higher 3 years ago during a major crisis. So no, I don't make much of it other than the fact that, yes, the mining cost of gold has to be going up because they haven't been discovering for so long, and just because of general inflation. So if the mining cost goes up a little bit, well, the price of gold has to go up a little bit, but it has certainly not kept up with inflation in the monetary world.
You brought up a lot of stuff. I'm not going to touch on the Peter Schiff stuff, although it's tempting. However, I'm curious, moving forward, where do you see demand for precious metals coming from, if anywhere? What comes to your mind?
I don't. That's my whole point. I don't actually believe central banks are buying. First of all, if the Russians and Chinese, let's say if they are buying it, and the numbers that they have are very small compared to the theoretical amounts that say the U.S. and Germany and Italy have. Theoretical because they're not audited, so no one knows what they actually have, if they have even close to that much. But let's say that the Chinese and Russian are buying gold. Well, they're just buying it with their own printed money. I mean, it's just natural course of inflation, and the prices haven't been going up any more than the amount of money they're printing. But I don't believe that the central bankers sit around anywhere, certainly not in the Western world, talking about how they want to buy gold with their money, even with their printed money. And then, of course, you have the older generations that have gold holdings that, 60, 70, 80-year-old people, they're obviously not going to buy more. They already have what they need, and they're near the end of their lives. And what are they going to do? They're going to pass it on to younger people who don't even know that gold and silver were once monetary or even care. And probably a lot of them are going to sell it for fiat currency or for Bitcoin and, modern forms of money. So if you ask me, where do I think gold silver demand's coming from? I don't see anywhere, except, like I said, yes, there's a worst case scenario of a total inflationary collapse, in which case, well, of course, gold and silver will have some kind of bid for them, but that'll be nothing compared to Bitcoin. And of course, for all the people talking about, oh, the government could stop Bitcoin. No, you can't stop Bitcoin. It's a global computer protocol that can be traded in many ways. They can certainly stop gold and silver. They have done it in the past. They can just shut down bullion deals. It's pretty easy, but I don't think it'll get to that. I just don't see any real source of demand in the future for precious metals.
Not even from the jewelry market.
It's funny because even jewelry, think about it. Who buys jewelry anymore? Jewelry is becoming as archaic as gold and silver themselves. I mean, people don't even buy watches anymore. They use cell phones. People, generally speaking, especially the younger generations, are less into jewelry than they ever have been before. They look at it as just kind of a relic of the past. And I don't believe for a second that jewelry demand is going to keep rising any faster than it has before, if at all.
Here's a working hypothesis I have. So there's a dislocation currently in the jewelry market. The end consumer of those products has become lives in a world with more information and knows the value of that jewelry and knows that they're paying way too much for the metal, the base metal, and that the precious metal. And perhaps moving forward, the premium market could collapse out of jewelry, and you'll be buying jewelry in the future at bullion prices, and that might become that new market, which might increase demand.
Well, yeah, I think you're just agreeing with me. You're saying that people have less demand for jewelry. I mean, in fact, I bought jewelry for my wife in the past where I was buying it, looking at the metal content. That was my primary thing. I mean, there's plenty of beautiful jewelry out there, but I might as well find ones that have more metal content and less markup. And the fact is, if people are buying less jewelry, well, the markup is going to go down on it. It's going to get more competitive, and I mean, it's just a small aspect of what I'm talking about here. Is what you're bringing up, that I just think jewelry is becoming archaic. I just think people have less use for it than they ever had before. People are not into being standing out the way they used to be, and I just think that's yet another part of the death knell of precious metals.
So I guess my conclusion is slightly different. Like, I think that the premiums in jewelry is going to collapse. There's not going to be a premium on jewelry, and people will only pay for the metals. And even if it's just so that they can take photos of themselves on Instagram showing off their bling, that very well could be the entirety of demand for precious metals moving forward.
Well, it could be. And if that's the case, then the price is going to go down a lot because that's not a lot of demand to start with.
Great. Okay. Bitcoin price dynamics. Could you kind of discuss where we're at currently with the Bitcoin price? It's kind of been trading to downwards. What is your take on that?
Well, look, there's never been anything like it before, this asset. And the thing that people need to recognize most about it is, one, of course, that it's increased dramatically. It's been the best over the past 10 years. It's been easily the best performing asset, coming from essentially nothing. Whether it's nothing to 20,000 or nothing to 7,000, it's far exceeded stocks, bonds, any kind of currency, and certainly precious metals. But it's extremely volatile because it's brand new. There's a lot of forces acting on it. There's a lot of, as we say, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There's always something new people are worried about because it's just so novel and people don't understand how it works and its future. And I have never seen anything more uncorrelated to anything else. It's essentially, no matter what people want to say. I mean, I read someone in Forbes the other day was saying, well, it's all about the China trade negotiations. I'm like, this guy isn't serious. There's absolutely no correlation between Bitcoin and what the Chinese government has done, what the Fed has done, what debt has done, stock markets, nothing. It goes to the beat of its own drummer. It trades more like anything, a brand new technology that's testing itself in the world. So I guess volatility is probably less now than it was in 2009, 10, 11, but it's still pretty high, and it still doesn't care about almost anything in the news world. I mean, if anything, like I think about even a few years ago, in 2017, when the price was going up 20 times, it was terrifying because there were a lot of things that worried me. Today, there's nothing that worries me. I'm not worried about Chinese crackdowns or quantum supremacy or government crackdowns or it's just a matter of it goes to the beat of its own drummer. And right now, what matters most to me is the fact that the hash rate, meaning the amount of computers that are running the Bitcoin protocol, is by far the highest it's ever been. I mean, actually, the highest was maybe a few months ago. It's close to that. And we have a halving coming up in just 5 months, which is going to cut the supply in half. So right now, it's in a downtrend. We've seen much shorter bull and bear cycles than we had in earlier stages of Bitcoin. So I expect that this bear cycle too will be ending shortly, especially with the halving. But as for the short term, why it does what it does, I just don't know.
I'm curious about your journey from working in the precious metals industry, being a gold bull, to being completely in on cryptocurrencies. When was the aha moment, and what was that process like for you?
Well, again, I was back in 2012, 13, when Bitcoin started moving up as a precious metals guy. I wasn't just a bull. I was one of the leading commentators going back to the early 2000s. So I would get,
I'll back you up on that. That is true.
yeah, yeah. And so I would get Bitcoin people saying, well, what do you think of Bitcoin? Look, it's going up. I mean, it wasn't worth a lot back then. It's going to be the money of the future. And of course, I initially had pushback because A, I didn't understand it, and B, it wasn't worth much. It was a very tiny novelty, and it was very volatile. And I felt threatened by it because when it went up and gold wasn't, it felt like people were attacking me. But I was intrigued enough to buy some that I had at Mt. Gox, a small amount, because even back then it intrigued me, the concept, but not enough to own a big position. And then, of course, there was the big crash, and I watched it, and I just watched it. And basically, from 2014 and 15, it was just dead. I mean, it sat around $300 forever. And during that time, as gold and silver just became worse and worse and worse. They crashed in 2011, and throughout that time, they did nothing, and they caused me nothing but misery in my personal and professional life. And then in early 2016, I knew the halving was coming, and it just seemed like the bear market was ending. So I went in big on it. But it wasn't really until the middle of 2017 when the scaling wars looked like they were done. I mean, my aha moment, frankly, was when SegWit locked in July of 2017, when I knew that the Bcash, that the hard fork people were not going to win. And that's when I started selling my silver en masse to buy precious metals. And once in early August of 2017, when Bcash forked off, and it didn't destroy Bitcoin, because that was a big issue, like what will happen, that's when I went all in. That's when I even started to sell my gold. Because I knew that the Bitcoin blockchain was in fact immutable, and as early as it was, compared to where we are now, like from a hash rate standpoint, I knew that Bitcoin wasn't going away. And all the things that I was saying earlier in this call about precious metals being archaic compared to Bitcoin, that's when it clicked in for me, and I'll never go back.
What are you telling gold bugs who perhaps read your work or seek you out?
I don't talk gold anymore. I mean, my website is Crypto Gold Central. I guess I started it in September 2017 to talk about both. Back then, I still owned gold, but I sold it a few months later. And I did think, in fact, my premise, especially when I was writing about it at Miles Franklin, was that there would be a kind of a dual threat to the fiat currency system. But then, by the end of 2017, I just thought that gold and silver are going nowhere. And I wrote plenty about it. And by the time we got to 2018, I just really have nothing more to say about it. What I'm telling you now, gets the point across. I have absolutely no interest in gold and silver. And the only people from my past readers who read me now are people who think like me and have moved on to Bitcoin. I mean, there may be a handful that have both, but there's, it's not like I get questions from quote gold bugs. They know my stance that I long ago left that community.
I mean, we're living at a very exciting time in human history, really, to think where we've come. Like when I was in the gold market back in 2010, 2011, like a lot of the apps that we use today didn't even exist. I'm going through kind of Instagram and learning a little bit about the gold um, customer who still exist, and realizing how much they love hunting and things like this.
Hunting.
Yes, yeah, they love hunting. I mean, that's a great thing about today. You can go on Instagram and you can actually like really learn your customer. If you're running a business, you can really understand what they're like in their kind of personal lives, which is something that wasn't possible back in 2009, 2010. So I'm curious, like moving forward, how do you think this is all going to play out in terms of Bitcoin, and what will the investment community look like in the future as Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies become more mainstreamed?
Yeah, the only real question is how long that will be. I mean, we've had glimpses of it, but so far, we've had surges, but they were quickly followed by crashes. I think you're going to have higher lows. Obviously, the Mount Gox low it went from 1,000 to 200, and then you had 20,000, but the low is 3,000, and now we'll see if we have a high. I assume we'll have a higher low here, and I really believe that the having this coming year is going to be historic, because I think it will lead to a brand new, it'll lead to a significantly higher price that's going to bring in institutional investment. Now that we have these institutional platforms being built, between the derivatives markets and all the ETFs that are getting ready, and custody programs, and just better storage and understanding of how it works, I think that you're going to see significant capital move into the space. It's just there's really no way of knowing how fast. Will 2020 be watershed? Where all of a sudden Bitcoin's worth $1 trillion, like like John McAfee talks about, or will it take longer than that? But I do believe that it's not just Bitcoin; it's a transformation to a digital economy where I believe stocks and bonds are archaic, let alone fiat currencies, and that so we're going to see a lot of change that will take a long time. But Bitcoin is such a flashpoint that it is very possible that it has an extremely dramatic uptick in utilization much sooner than people expect. It's just hard to tell.
Could you speak a little bit about is it let's see here, WM coin, correct?
MWC.
MWC, Mimblewimble coin.
Yes. Well, that's the only coin that I've ever been part of developing. I mean, people know that I've worked hard supporting a coin called Bitcoin Rhodium, but I was never part of that team. I just got it as a free airdrop and believed in the story enough to spend time supporting its marketing. But Mimblewimble coin is we just launched its mainnet in November. We're in the middle of the airdrop process. Basically 1% of the entire Bitcoin community registered for it, and most of it has been claimed. And that'll be done in a week or two. We trade on one exchange, Hotbit, and right now to me the future of crypto is changing rapidly. And the thing that people I think are going to start to realize very quickly as this Mimblewimble technology advances is that the current blockchain protocol is archaic itself. Bitcoin's protocol is archaic. It works, it's not going away, but it's not private enough, it's not scalable enough, and it's not fungible enough. And that's why Mimblewimble technology is so exciting, because it will dramatically improve all those things. And I think the Bitcoin community seems scared of it because they worry that, there could be a debate about whether we should have a hard fork to have Mimblewimble. And I think people in Bitcoin should embrace it, particularly those that registered and got their free MWC coin, because the goal of lead dev Chris Gilliard was to develop it so that one day it could be incorporated into Bitcoin and make it stronger. Because just like anything in technology, it's, the first version, again, Peter Schiff, he tries to make it seem like, well, Bitcoin's first, so that means it'll be usurped. Like Yahoo's usurped by Google. No, Bitcoin came out first. Its technology can be upgraded, though. That's the beauty of an open source project, and that's why I think Mimblewimble is going to be the future of blockchain protocol, because it's just that much better. But it's not going to replace Bitcoin. It's just the goal is to make it better.
There's a line of thinking that like Bitcoin's first, everyone's seen the browser wars or the social media wars, the MySpaces of the world play out. And I don't think that that is a proper analogy when you're looking at decentralized technologies like Bitcoin. I don't think you can point to AOL or early browsers and
Yes,
say,
that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because again, Bitcoin can upgrade. It's not like there's going to be look, Bitcoin was the virgin birth, right? It's not like you can have two messiahs, and you can't have two virgin births in cryptocurrency. You'll never have something where a concept came out and all of a sudden there's 100, the hash rate is, I mean, it's one of probably the biggest computer programs in the world right now. That can't be replicated, but it can be improved upon. So I really, it's not going to be like some coin is going to come out and be the new Bitcoin, but there's going to be technologies out there like Mimblewimble that are going to be addressed by the Bitcoin community. And like I said, as an open source project, it can address all of these things and will over time.
so Mimblewimble, I remember it came out like in 2016, and it was basically a blockchain protocol that improved fungibility, if I recall, and the scalability of Bitcoin. What's the relation between Mimblewimble coin and that protocol that was introduced a few years ago?
Yeah, the protocol, again, the Bitcoin white paper was 2008. The Mimblewimble white paper came out in 2016, also pseudonymously and anonymously. Same kind of thing. There's no person behind it. Well, there's a person, but no one knows who he is, and I don't think he's ever going to show his face. And basically, it was a way of having blockchains where you don't have to download the entire blockchain when every time there's that someone downloads the program to the computer. And on top of that, you don't have addresses or amounts. So it's not trackable. You can't say, well, there's a whale moving Bitcoin around. So, and that in turn improves the fungibility because you can't blacklist addresses like we saw when Binance got hacked. So Binance gets together with the government and says, we are officially saying no one can use these addresses, So all three of these things are addressed by Mimblewimble. And the technology, the white paper came out in 2016, but you didn't see any actual Mimblewimble blockchains until Grin and Beam came out just a year ago, like at the end of 2018. And even when they came out basically almost everything that was done on them was just trading, basically between accounts at the exchanges. But it's only now that you're starting to see real excitement where you have wallets that are user-friendly, cold storage. There's a lot more testing going on and it works. I believe by this time next year, the entire Bitcoin community will be well aware of the capabilities that it's basically ready to be used in the real world.
Tell us a little bit about Crypto Gold Central.
Right. Well, it came out, I started as I left Precious Metals in September 2017. And originally it was a blog, a paid subscription blog with a little consulting for individuals who mostly wanted to understand how do you invest in Bitcoin and use Trezors. But, that over time, there's been less demand for content because people know this stuff now. It's ubiquitous out there, how Bitcoin works, and it's very hard to add value that way. And generally speaking, people don't like to pay for content anymore. It's just the way the world is. There's just so much free stuff out there. And so basically it's become, I call it, I say professional cryptocurrency consultation, because I'm just looking for, ideas that can become big. And really the only idea that I've spent my time on as an actual consulting called client has been Mimblewimble Coin. I learned about it a year ago. I joined the team and I've spent, an increasing amount of my time. Now it's almost all of my time because I believe that it's going to be one of the major winners of the future. And as for Crypto Gold Central, I still do consulting on a personal and a coin developer basis. It's just right now it's all about the best ideas, not just any idea. I've rejected plenty of ideas.
So you still have gold in the name. Is that just so? Why is gold still in the name? And then a follow-up question. Well, let's leave it there. So why is gold still in kind of your
Well,
branding?
like I said, when I started, I believed in Bitcoin and gold, and then within a few months, I was off of gold. But it's a brand. I mean, gold just. It's a good crypto gold is a good name. It doesn't necessarily imply that I love gold. I mean, crypto is what's going to catch your ear when you see, or in your eye when you see it. But really, I just have no intention of changing it just because it's a brand that's known. That's all.
And perhaps crypto will be the new gold. So I want to kind of there's been a lot of news I've been reading lately, like countries repatriating their gold. I believe Poland just did it from the UK, and I'm curious, like, are they just repatriating gold in order to liquidate it for Bitcoin?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I don't know what they're doing. And obviously, Poland's a very tiny country. But again, first of all, I don't believe what any of these countries say. And second of all, yeah, I would definitely believe that countries would want to repatriate anything that's being held by these criminal countries in the West that control the global monetary system and manipulate the markets. So if Poland's doing it, it's probably more because they just don't trust other people than that they have this belief that gold is the future. And you don't even really see many stories like that. Even I remember when Germany was going to repatriate it, they said we want our gold back, and it was a big deal. And then the U.S. said, well, we're not giving it back. And then the next thing you know, it just kind of fades away, the story. I don't think anyone really cares, to be honest with you. I mean, that's my whole point with gold. I just think few and few people are watching or care.
We've spoken today with Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com. You can reach out to him at CryptoGoldCentral.com. Andy was a leading proponent of precious metals at a time when precious metals were reaching all times high, and he had been in that market for nearly a decade at that point. And now he's telling us that he's all in on crypto. So thank you so much, Andy, for the discussion. Do you have any concluding comments?
No, I appreciate. It's been a while since I've even talked about gold, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the two, gold and crypto, together. You can contact me anytime via Crypto Gold Central, or follow my Steemit page or my Twitter feed. But my to me the future is crypto led by Bitcoin, and that's where I'm going to be spending all my time.
Thank you for talking with us today.
You're very welcome.